If you've ever wondered how to set your Juki computerized machine for free motion quilting, well, stick around. By the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to get started in practicing making your beautiful free motion quilting. Hey guys, it's Boki here from Gigi's Fabric Shop, home to Juki and Janome Junkies, and in today's video we're going to talk about free motion quilting, specifically on the Juki computerized machines. If you follow along on our channel, you know that Gigi did a video on free motion quilting specifically on the TL, and I'll link that down in the description below for you. So if you have a Juki TL machine like the TL2010 or the TL18, watch that video. But today's video is going to be specifically on the computerized machines, and that's why I have both of these machines next to me today, so I can kind of walk you through those series of steps. It's really just about the same. We've kind of narrowed it down to 5 simple steps to get into free motion quilting, and it looks a little different depending on what model you have, so hopefully by the end of today you'll know all the do's and don'ts and exactly how to get started. So the first thing I feel like we need to address, and something I kind of noticed as I watched videos of people explaining free motion quilting, they don't tell you what is free motion quilting, they just jump in and tell you how to do it. So what is free motion quilting? This is a sewing technique that you use for quilting, and it's where your fabric is under the machine and you're moving it freely. So you usually drop the feed dogs down, you have some sort of quilting foot on the machine, and you are freely designing and moving the fabric or the quilt or the project freely under, and designing and kind of painting your image that you want under the machine freely. So it's not like straight line quilting or anything where it's kind of uniformed. It's much more organic, free flowing, hence free motion quilting. So that's what it is, and it's super fun, and there's so many ways to get into free motion quilting, and really it just comes down to practice. But we have to set our machines up for success, so that way we know exactly what we're doing on there and we set it up properly, and it knows that we're trying to free motion quilt versus using the feed dogs to make uniform stitches. So kind of some do's and don'ts there, but one of the most important things to do before we even get started is to look at those different free motion quilting feet that come with your machine. So I'm going to pull out the ones that Juki offers, and then that way you can kind of check your arsenal, or you can always head over to jukijunkies.com to get the ones that I mentioned here today that maybe you don't have at home. So what does Juki have to offer? There are 5 different free motion quilting feet that they provide. Some of them come with your machines, and the list is always different for your computerized machine at home. So definitely make sure you pull out that manual. On the first couple pages in the manual, there is a breakdown of everything that's included with your sewing machine. So always double check to see what is already at home before you go start buying other stuff. And I'll tell you some of my favorites here, but let's go through all that's available so that way you can decide what's best for your project. I'm going to start off with maybe the first one, and this one tends to come the most with a lot of the Juki machines. This is the quilting presser foot ZIGZAG type, also known as the darning presser foot. Some characteristics of this foot you'll notice is that it's completely clear, and the opening is much like the standard plate on your machine, what we call the jelly bean plate. The opening kind of looks like a little jelly bean. So it's wide like that because there is a technique in free motion quilting where you can use a zigzag stitch. That's really cool, but this foot allows you to use zigzags, it allows you to do straight stitch, has that wide opening so you can really see where you're going, and this foot also hops. So that is a very important thing to note, and this will make more sense as we dive into it, but this foot is a hopping foot. So you'll notice on the top there's a little bar. That bar actually sits like right under the needle, so as the needle is going up and down, it's actually activating that little spring, and it starts to hop up and down, making contact very briefly with your quilt or your project as you're free motion quilting. So this is very versatile, but it is a hopping style foot. So some people like a foot that stays put, and some people like feet that hop. Juki does offer a wide variety so that we can truly pick what's best for you, but this is a very versatile hopping style foot that you could certainly get into free motion quilting, but there are a couple options that might be more practical for you here today. And like I said, this comes with most of the machines, so definitely try this out and see if you like that, and then you can upgrade to one of these next options. The next 2 are going to be very, very similar. These are just the free motion quilting feet closed type and open type. So these 2 feet are exactly the same. These are not hopping feet. So when you look at the kind of the quality of this one, you'll notice that the bar is missing much that you saw on the darning foot. So that one doesn't sit like right under the needle. It's not like hopping up and down. It actually does have a little screw on the top that allows you to adjust the height of this as needed. depending on the thickness of your project. And we'll get into that as we dive into the actual steps into free motion quilting, but you gotta pick the right foot for your project. So why would I choose a closed over an open? Entirely up to personal preference. The biggest reason I can give you to deciding between closed and open is if you're working on a project that has dimensional appliques on the top, or any kind of ribbons or appliques or flanges, or anything that things can get caught on, definitely go with the closed toe type, because that way, since there's no opening, it can't get stuck on anything, right? But the open toe obviously is gonna give you the best visibility across the board from all of these 5 free motion quilting feet. So if you wanna have a really good view of where you're going and you don't have a lot of dimensional stuff going on top of your project or quilt, go with the open toe type. You'll love it. And of course it is adjustable, so that way you can adjust it to your needs. Doesn't hop like the darning foot does. The next one is definitely a little bit of a more specialty type of free motion quilting foot, but it does fall under this category. It's the cording and embroidery free motion quilting foot. So it kind of has like a donut shaped bowl at the bottom, and it has like a little tunnel to the side of it. And this is used for like free motion quilting with yarn. It's a very decorative, fun type of free motion quilting. And you can certainly use this for like free motion embroidery. There's a lot of people that do free motion like lace, where they free motion quilt on water soluble types of fabrics and stabilizers. That's very cool, very technique driven. This foot is designed specifically for those type of applications. So would I recommend this for, you know, all purpose general free motion quilting? Probably not. It is much more closed, smaller opening. There's a lot more there blocking you from seeing. Something like the open toe or the closed toe would probably be a better option for you. But this foot does hop as well. There is also a screw on the top, so you can adjust it to the thickness and the loft of your quilt. So if you ever want to get into that, I would love to make a video about that one day, because I've done it at quilt shows, and it is the funnest thing to free motion quilt with yarn. It is so cool, so fun. All right, and last on the list here, number 5 is going to be the ruler foot. So the ruler foot is used specifically for ruler work when free motion quilting. So you can totally do more symmetrical like designs, or where it looks very machine-like and very professional. And that free motion quilting usually comes from rulers. So there are these clear rulers that you can use as your free motion quilting to create scallops and feathers and all kinds of amazing designs. I mean, there's probably dozens and dozens of different types of rulers just designed for that type of technique. For that technique, you will need a ruler foot, because ruler feet have a raised border all the way around, so that way that the ruler can actually sit up against it and it doesn't slide under the needle and you sew over the ruler or something like that. So designed, very specific application. And the ruler foot also doesn't hop. This also stays in place. So really the only one that hops here today is going to be this darning zigzag type quilting presser foot. And then one thing to note is that if you have the DX4000, the DX3000, and the NX7, you do get a ruler foot for this machine, but it is clear. And it's plastic and flimsy. So sometimes I've had people say, hey, I'd like to have something a little bit stronger. You certainly can get the metal free motion quilting foot. You just have to use your adapter shank on that machine in order to use this foot. The adapter shank is something exclusively for the big top of the line machines that Juki offers, NX7, DX3000, DX4000. So I wanted to throw this out there today because I actually got an email about this exact question today. Hey, I wish I could get a better ruler foot. Well, they do have one. You just have to use the adapter shank. So once you kind of know what's out there, check your stash. Maybe you don't have to invest in something right away. And if there's something that's absolutely catching your eye here today, head over to JukiJunkies.com and you can shop all of these feet there. But for me today, a great foot that I always like to use, especially since I'm not doing anything textured, is that front open toe. So I'm going to be using that one. That's step number 1 in this process, is just kind of know what you have, figure it out, and pick which is the best for you. Next thing I want to talk about is getting your project ready. No matter how big or how small the project is, this process always looks the same. Your steps might look a little different, of course, if it's way bigger than this little guy that I have here today, but getting your project prepared for free motion quilting is very important. So if you are at home and you're just starting out and you're just trying to get into free motion quilting, I would highly recommend doing something like I'm doing here today, creating a sandwich, if you'll call it. So there's 3 layers in a sandwich. You have your top bun, your bottom bun, and then your fixings on the inside. So in today's example, I have my fabric on the top, my fabric on the back, and I have my batting in the middle, making my sandwich. So I like to use some solid fabric so that way I can really see where I'm going, something more solid-ish. Another really good thing to practice on is panels. If you have some panels at home and you don't know what to do with them, panels are so much fun to practice free motion quilting on, because you can, you know, kind of get into the habit of going around things, creating designs, figuring out how you can accentuate parts of the quilt and just add little details here and there. Really let your mind explore. But free motion quilting is much like when you're on the phone with somebody and you're doodling, right? So it's that same kind of fun, that aimless designing. You just have to always think about where you're gonna go. So preparing that project, if this was a huge quilt, maybe a throw, king, even a baby quilt, you're gonna have always those 3 layers. Traditionally on a quilt, you would have a little bit more on the backing, but just for sandwich making here today, for practicing, I usually don't like to make my backing larger than my top. I always make them the same, just for no wasting purposes. And then these could be turned into some fun pot holders by the end of your practice too, so it doesn't have to be a total waste. But for something like this, I don't have to do too much prep to this. It's usually, honestly, giving this a good little press is gonna keep all your layers together. But if you were working with a quilt on a bigger scale, I would recommend one of these 2 options. So if you're working with a quilt, you want to make sure those layers stay nicely together. One thing you could do is baste all the way around, but basting is probably like my least favorite option of doing it, because it can get more tedious with larger scale quilts to really make sure things don't shift around. So for smaller projects, basting, which is using a really large stitch length, 5 or 6, whatever your machine does, you would sew all the way around on the project and just kind of keep it in place, keep things from shifting. Basting is more ideal for smaller projects. For bigger projects, one of these 2 is going to suffice. One of the most fan favorites is using some sort of temporary adhesive spray like 505. This is a great spray that you can use to spray on your batting on both sides, and it kind of creates a slight tackiness to the batting so that the layers stay together. So that way you don't have to do any pinning, you don't have to do anything too crazy. Again, I would say this is a good option for small to medium-sized quilts. Anything really large, I would still go with the good old-fashioned pinning route. So you could probably do a combination of both for a large quilt. So for large quilts, you can always use curved pins. Curved pins are exactly what they sound like. They're just little safety pins that have a little bit of extra thickness to them. Of course, they like to make like a little chain link when you just need one. But they do have a slight curvature to them, so that way they make it a little bit easier to go inside the quilt, and then of course you can just snip it closed, and then that is going to be the most secure way to keep your project together. While yes, this is a little annoying for free motion quilting, because obviously the goal is to not run these over, but for bigger quilts you're going to want to do it. Be safe rather than sorry, because you don't want the quilt to shift around. Maybe half of the quilt is one way and then you start getting to the bottom and things have started to wean their way off because we've been applying too much pressure. So prepping your project is crucial to having success in free motion quilting, to make sure all layers are constantly stable from the start to the finish of the project. Next step in getting ready for free motion quilting, I usually always encourage having your extension table put on the machine. Unless you're working with something really small, maybe you don't need it, but even for my little practice run that I'm doing here today, I'm definitely going to make sure my extension table is put on. So for the DX7, DX2000, you get your little extension table. And if your machine doesn't come with one, I highly encourage that you consider investing in one, because it's very nice even for working with like bigger and heavier projects, not just free motion quilting. So we're just going to slide this over the machine. These legs are fully adjustable, so that way you can adjust it to be nice and level with your work area that you have going on. But the reason why this is nice is A, the obvious. It's giving you a larger work area, but B, when you're free motion quilting things that are heavier or bigger, having the weight be pulled down and not nice and flush is always going to be your enemy, because you're working against it, right? Gravity is pulling that quilt down no matter how small or big it is. So having it nice and flat and, you know, not draping off of the table or draping off the machine is crucial, because it's just going to provide better stitch quality and just an easier free motion quilting path for you, because it's not as heavy. Or if you have a cabinet at home where you can drop your machine down and get a little insert, for example, the Gidget 2 table on JukiJunkies.com is one of our best selling tables. It's super practical, almost can fit in anybody's space, and that opening can fit just about any sewing machine in there, and you can drop it down, get a nice clear insert so that we have a nice flush work area for quilting, for piecing, for whatever you got to do. You have a nice flat workspace. So that's a great solution too, but good old-fashioned extension table is a good way to start. The next step is making sure that you have the right sewing machine needle for this project. We are always expressing the importance of needles, and it's one of those small details that goes a very long way. Recently, I did a really great series about matchmaking your needles per application. I would highly recommend you guys go watch the one specifically for quilting, because we talk about a lot of these types of applications, and we talk about the different needles and what they do and their characteristics, and knowledge is power in that category. So always knowing the different needles and sizes is very important. But to put in a speedy answer for you is I would definitely be working with the top stitch needle here. We carry the Schmetz brand of sewing machine needles, and they have so many great different types of needles with different qualities to them, and the top stitch needle is by far my favorite. They have that large extra eye to create those larger loops. With free motion quilting, since there's no regulation really, it's you regulating your speed and going as fast as you'd like. Using a top stitch needle is going to be really nice to help prevent skip stitching, and it's just going to make sure those stitches connect all the way through unless you're moving a little too fast. So top stitch needle in size 90-14 is what I would highly encourage you to put on your machine for most projects. However, if you're working with something a little bit thicker, or if you're working with a lot more batting, you might want to consider sizing up. And in that video that I talk about the matchmaking for quilting, I do discuss that as well. So definitely go give that video a watch to understand this topic a little bit better. But top stitch 90-14 is probably going to be your go-to needle 90% of the time. Alrighty, so for our next step, which is probably debatably the most important step, is dropping our feed dogs down. But since we're in this nice kind of close-up angle, I did want to show you just kind of what it looks like to install your free motion quilting feet on your machine. I'm on the DX7 here today, and this is that open toe presser foot that you see here for free motion quilting. So all you have to do is, I usually like to make sure you have the machine off for this step, and then this is the little screw that actually is attached to the ankle. So I'm just going to loosen that really quickly. And then the foot should almost just effortlessly kind of fall off the actual ankle itself, and we can remove that. Grab our free motion quilting foot and just slide it in there in place of the ankle. I'm going to hand tighten this just for right now, and then tighten it fully with the screwdriver. So that's really what it looks like. And then when you put this down, you can kind of see that it has a little bit of a space underneath, but it's really, really simple to install your free motion quilting feet. All right, so we can turn the machine back on, get that light back in that space for us. And I'm just gonna tuck in our little thread tail below here, but now dropping the feed dog. So it's actually located when you take your free arm cover off. You'll notice right down here, you have these two little mountains. It looks like mountains over the horizon and under the horizon. Right now, it's activated in the upwards position, meaning that those feed dogs are moving when we actually move the needle. So you'll see them come up and down as we're going. We're gonna drop those feed dogs, and you will see them drop back down, and they're not gonna move as we're sewing. So that's what you should be setting your machine at whenever you're doing any type of free motion quilting where you are freely moving the fabric. They should always be in that downward position. A fun little tip for you guys as well, this is something I hear constantly, is when you put them back up, notice how nothing happened. Nothing's going on with those feed dogs. Well, why aren't they moving back up and down? You have to cycle your hand wheel once for them to come back up into the upward motion, and that goes for any of the Juki machines, and sometimes they can make like a louder noise because it's activating back in its upwards position, but you're not going to see them physically go back up until you start to cycle your hand wheel, or maybe just press the needle up and down button. And this, what I showed you, is really going to apply across the board for all the G series, for all the F series. So if you have an F600, 400, 300, DX7, DX5. It's really the same across this board. It does look a little bit different on those top of the line machines, but I just want to give you that visual in case if you have that machine at home. All right, so for the top of the line series, to change out those feet and drop the feed dogs is going to look a little bit different, but very, very similar. This is going to apply to the NX7, DX4000, and DX3000. One thing that's nice about these machines is that you don't have to turn the machine off to, do any adjusting to make sure you don't sew over your fingers. There's a lock feature on this machine, which is actually right here. This is your shared functionality between your feed dogs and your lock button. So to lock the machine, you just hold it down for a couple of seconds, and this little light is going to turn red, and there's going to be a message that pops up on the screen saying, hey, we're in lock mode. To unlock, you're going to press down that button again for a couple seconds to go back to its regular regular scheduled program, if you will. So now that this is nice and locked, I don't have to worry about turning the machine off. I still got the excellent lighting here, and we're gonna start to change over what we need to get the right foot on. So again, I'm gonna be installing the front open toe foot, but the process looks a little bit different here. So on this machine, you have to use an adapter shank. So this is what's going to come with your adapter shank. You're going to get an extra screw and then the physical shank that goes onto the machine. So it's just these two little guys that's going to allow you to put any of the free motion quilting feet that I actually mentioned here today. Aside from the ruler foot that's clear that comes with the machine, you do not have to use the adapter shank for that, but for all other free motion quilting feet, you will have to do that. So let's go ahead and install this. It's very similar to the DX's process, but the machine's nice and locked now. And this little screw up here, we're gonna loosen, so that way that whole shank can come off. And I have to take the screw completely off because I have to slide the actual shank on. And I know my hand is in the way, but just for a second, you guys, just for a second. There we go. So there's a little screw that comes off. So keep this close by. You're gonna need both sets of screws for installing the adapter shank. You'll notice that it's kind of like a half moon, sort of. One side is nice and flat, and then of course the other side is fully rounded. The flat side is going to face the left part of the machine, and you can't really install this incorrectly because that's the only way it'll go on. Much like your needle, it's the same thing. So that first screw that we took off of the machine that was holding the ankle, we're gonna go ahead and put that one right back where it was. We're gonna align those holes up and then go ahead and tighten them into place. And now we're gonna take our little foot here and we're gonna line it up with that second hole, and then we're gonna put this second screw. That's why you get another one, because you kind of need two in this little area. Sometimes it helps if you just tighten the screw first, just so it gets a little bit of a grip. Tighten it as much as you can with your hands first, but then always go in with a screwdriver to make sure you tighten it. So that's your setup that you got there. Very similar to the DX's, just a little bit of an extra step. All right, so now let's go ahead and unlock the machine, holding down that button just for a little bit to let it know that we're back in our mode here. And then we are gonna drop the feed dogs, which is actually in the same spot. So I'm gonna press this little button until it is green, making sure that they're not going all the way up. You'll see them still move, but they're in a down position. They're not going fully up. So when I turn this back on, you'll see the difference, how they go completely higher. They're actually making contact with the fabric, versus when the feed dogs are down, the little light that's next to that button is activated, and you'll see them still moving, but they're not quite as high. So make sure we're in that feed dog down position with the little green light activated. All right, so the next step that we're going to talk about is the speed control, which is a very important part of free motion quilting, especially when working on machines that don't have a built-in stitch regulation. And if you've ever watched any of her videos and Gigi's talked about free motion quilting to you, she will always tell you how you don't need to spend your money on stitch regulation. You just have to practice and understand how to set the speed. So speed control is usually located on the front of your machine, and it's the little tortoise and the hare, and you can decide how fast you'd like to go at maximum speed. So if I go at full capacity, we're gonna go super fast at over 1,000 stitches per minute, which is not the goal here. We want to kind of go at a slower pace so that way we can try our best to regulate our stitch quality and make sure that the stitches look as uniform as possible. So a good kind of rule of thumb for me is if you kind of find like the middle, you want to set your machine at like 30 or 40%. All right, so this is entirely adjustable based on personal preference. If you want to go faster, you certainly can if that works for you. But for starting out, this is always a great place to be, kind of at that 40% marker there. So once I put my presser foot back down, when I press on the foot pedal at my full speed, let me speed that up just a little bit. So once I press at my full speed, this is as fast as the machine is gonna go. So I have to learn how to read how fast I'm going in order to regulate my stitch quality. So how are the stitches gonna stay consistent is entirely up to how fast you're moving. So if I start to move really quickly, watch what happens. Those stitches are gonna become ginormous. I mean, look at that. That's like a basting stitch right there. Look how long this stitch is. Super long. So compared to these nice and tight stitches over here, this is definitely not secure, and this is not what we're looking for. If you're trying to baste, sure, that's a great place to be. But just for regular free motion quilting, we definitely don't want that kind of look there. So it's all about maintaining your speed, making sure your shoulders are nice and relaxed, and just getting a feel for how fast you're going, and don't be afraid to stop. You can always program your machine to end in a needle down position, so that way you can adjust and pivot as needed, and don't rush it. The hard part about free motion quilting is trying to discover where you're going next and how you're going to make everything connect, because you're not trying to cut the thread a bunch of times, right? And you can certainly always like pre-draw what you want to do so your mind can get a little bit more used to this. I always say free motion quilting is not the easiest thing to learn, because the pen, which is the machine, is moving up and down, and you're moving the paper, which is very, very different than how we're drawing and doodling where we're taking phone calls, right? So it's hard to know, how am I gonna make this all connect, and how do I go in one design, out the other, how am I gonna make it all connect? Just takes a lot of practice. I'm not the most gifted in this category, and some people just have the talent. Like if you watch Gigi, she can just free motion quilt for hours. But the goal here is to try to keep your shoulders nice and relaxed, have a really good grip on your fabric, make sure your work area is nice and flush, and that speed control is key. So after you've kind of practiced, you can decide for yourself, hey, I want my stitches to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. You adjust that in your speed and to your comfortability. So just find that little sweet spot for yourself. I want to show you guys some gadgets that will make this process a little bit easier for you, for maybe having a better grip while free motion quilting. All right, the first little tool that I want to mention is our Gecko Quilting Gloves. I'll have these linked for you guys down below. These do come in a small, medium, and large size. And these are really, really nice little gloves that just help you have a better grip on your fabric. So like these little tips kind of have like a coated material to them, so you have a better grip and you're not just using your hands to grip the fabric. I would actually even size up here to a medium, since I have nails and it's taking up a little bit of space. Sometimes what Gigi likes to do is cut these little fingertips off, so she still is utilizing the grip of this, but she also has her fingertips, so it's like kind of like a 2-in-1. That's just her personal preference. Another thing I want to mention when you're free motion quilting is making sure that your setup is appropriate to your height. So like whatever table you're at, if you have an adjustable chair, you want to make sure your quilt is not super high up and that you're kind of like, you know, like putting your body upwards towards your quilt. You definitely want to make sure you have good posture, that your shoulders are nice and relaxed, and that your quilt is not super low but not super high. Like think about how you would eat at a dining room table. Your arms are not super high or they're not super low, like, you know, kind of hunched over your food, but just proper, you know, your arms are almost at like a 90-degree angle. So same thing here, still free motion quilting, but I feel like I have so much of a better grip when I have these gloves on. And honestly, for myself, I feel like I could maybe even go a little bit faster, because yes, I talk fast, I sew fast, I do everything just a little bit fast, but this is entirely up to your personal preference. So I really do like these gloves. They are a necessity whenever we're doing a show. Gigi loves the gloves, and the Gecko gloves are a really nice, affordable start first to finding what you like for free motion quilting versus jumping into something else. But I have two other really cool options that Juki offer as well. So let me show you those. The next thing I want to show you is these little quilters paddles. They're really cool. They have like a non-slip grip to the bottom of them, so they make really good contact with your fabric. And then of course on the other side, it just is imprinted in Juki. So that way these little paddles almost are like a little bit more of a natural way to gripping your fabric, instead of having your hands kind of sprawled out. Your hands are a little bit more relaxed holding these paddles, and then you can free motion quilt this way as well. So I like this method too. And the nice thing about these paddles is that this will work really on any throat space machine that you have. So whether you have a 12-inch throat space machine, or you have, you know, just 8.5 inches, or whatever it may be, these are really, really nice as well. And they have a really good grip on the fabric. We like to demo these on our long arms as well. So these are fantastic. You can use them on whatever machine you have at home. Very, very easy. I'll have these linked in the description below as well. The next little option I want to show you guys, it just is dependent on what machine you have at home, but it's these little quilting rings. I find that these quilting rings are going to be a really nice option if you have a machine with a 12-inch throat space, because these rings do come in two sizes. There's an 8-inch ring and there is an 11-inch ring, and you can order them individually or in a set together. but these are something we traditionally show with our long arm, but I do love the way that these quilt. So this is a really cool setup. It has a little opening on the top and these two little handles. So it lets you focus on this area, which I really like, because instead of looking at a quilt in the grand scheme of things and trying to figure out where the heck you're gonna go, you get to work in this little 8-inch area first, 8 inches at a time, which is really nice. It helps you kind of concentrate better and decide where you're gonna go. It's really easy. It just slides over this little area. You pick where you want to start and you just go for it. I love the way these rings feel. This little flower thing that I keep drawing is like one of the first things I learned how to draw or to free motion quilt just by observation of watching Gigi doing her beautiful free motion quilting. I can already tell you this is my favorite option for free motion quilting. I love the way these rings feel. So the rings are really, really nice. Like I said, you get to focus in one little area at a time. It's really easy to pivot and move. This is really nice. And the 8 would be kind of your maximum on these smaller end machines, but on, you know, the top of the line, like the 4000, NX7, and 3000, you could certainly utilize the 8 and the 11-inch rings without a problem because you would have plenty of space. So I'll have these linked down below for you guys. And honestly, you don't need things like this to start free motion quilting, but it's just nice to know all your options, especially if you start playing and you get really, really good at free motion quilting. These are just gonna be those little tools to make you get better and better and better. All right, for our last little tip, which is kind of a bonus tip, is talking about that proper height that you're looking for while you're free motion quilting. So as you can see, the foot is all the way down and I'm freely able to move the fabric. There is a right and wrong to that. And of course, knowing how to adjust it if you're working with a bulkier project or something a little bit thinner with less loft. So we talked about the foot obviously having a little screw that allows you to adjust it. So I can bring this up more and you'll start to see the foot lifting ever so much. Where I have too much space. Obviously, this is a total no-no for this project. There's way too much space down here. What's gonna happen is there's gonna be a lot of bounce and the stitches are gonna suffer because the needle is bouncing up and pulling the fabric down. So I wanna put this more down and apply more pressure because my little project here today is not nearly as thick as that is. So I'm gonna show you a bad example of too much. So it's going down and it's making contact. And I kind of feel resistance. I can feel it kind of tugging on the machine. That's also not what I'm looking for. So we're trying to find like a nice little sweet spot where it's still making a little bit of contact with the fabric. It's still giving a little bit of resistance so that way that fabric doesn't pop up, because if the fabric is popping up, then the stitches are not gonna form really nice. So we're still looking for a little bit of contact there, but I have free motion here. I can freely move things and not worry about it being too tight or way, way too loose. So you can adjust that on the foot as well, but depending on your machine, you also have the capability to adjust your presser foot height on the machine. So for example, on the DX7, that's one of the really nice admirable features on this series versus the F series is having the ability to adjust presser foot height. So in the little wrench tool right here, you're gonna scroll through until you find what looks like some fabric with the presser foot and a little indicator between those two. So we're gonna go here, and this is gonna allow you to make more room. So if you're working with something really, really lofty, you certainly could adjust this height to go up. And once this starts going, you'll see the actual foot is lifting as well, increment by increment at a time. At its max, 2.5, it's a super big gap. So much like how I was adjusting manually here, this is another way of doing it as well. If you were working with something really, really lofty, instead of having to adjust that, you could do it here. So I'm just gonna put it way back down, back to 0, because I've already found my sweet spot here, but it's just nice knowing all your options to adjust as needed. Remember, you can't put more pressure here on the screen, so that's where you'd wanna adjust it on the foot, but if you needed, you know, more room, you could certainly do it here instead of adjusting on the screen too. So just to go over some of those settings as far as adjusting your height on some of the big machines, the DX4000, DX3000, and NX7 all also have that presser foot pressure. It's just obviously a little bit different since this is the 4000, the screen is a little bit different. It's much easier to find, but you do have that capability on those machines. So here you find your presser foot pressure, usually standard is 0, so it's just kind of at a normal. You can apply more pressure, and that's gonna apply a little bit more compression to this sandwich versus at 0. Watch how at 0 it was way more free going. And then of course, if I go into the negative values, negative presser foot pressure value, that foot starts to lift. Negative 2.5 is the most I can go. And here you can see that there's probably like 1/8 of an inch between me and my sandwich, which is way too much space. So I can adjust it easily on the screen as well as on that little dial on the foot, but we're kind of looking for a little bit of resistance, not too much, but just enough. Like, you want it to feel free, but you want it to just have a little bit of contact with that fabric just so it doesn't bounce up as much. So really the same thing here applies. I know I don't have an extension table on here right now, but I just wanted to show you how free motion quilting is a breeze. I know I got light thread on here, you guys, I'm sorry. Let me move this little tail out the way. Free motion quilting on this machine feels so good. Not to mention, I have so much more space. I have 12 inches to work with here. So I could easily use one of those rings. Free motion quilting is just so fun. It just becomes so therapeutic. You just kind of get lost in free motion and doodling and creating all kinds of fun designs. But you can see here my stitches stayed pretty consistent. I'm at about halfway speed for myself. I like to sew a little bit faster because I move a little bit faster, but you just have to find that sweet spot for yourself to make your stitches feel the most fluid. And just like that, 5 little steps plus a bonus one, you're ready to start free motion quilting. I hope you guys enjoyed this video here today and it gave you that little push of encouragement that you needed just to try. And even if you're not good, it's still good to practice and maybe you'll grow into being an awesome free motion quilter. So I did mention a lot of really great accessories today to make your free motion quilting a lot easier. So head over to JukiJunkies.com to get those. You don't need all those things, but it's nice to just know your options so you can decide what's best for you. And if you guys were maybe interested in any of these beautiful machines that I was quilting on today, like the DX4000, remember we are an authorized Juki dealer here in Brandon, Florida. We're a small mom and pop shop and we are so passionate about Juki products and we're always here to make sure we're putting you on the right machine. So give us a call, send us an email, put a little comment down below and we'd love to work with you to put you on the right machine. Head over to JukiJunkies.com to see more specs on these guys. There's so much information everywhere, so definitely check out the channel, check out the website, sign up for the newsletter. Don't miss a beat. We hope to see you soon. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new. Subscribe to the channel to not miss out on any new fun content, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.